Hello, everyone. A warm and bright morning to our beautiful crowd. Yes, it's day 3. We've made it. You've survived the merger trends, the market deaths, the FDI debates, and possibly a few late-night side events. So if you're still standing and still smiling, that's a victory already. But before we indulge ourselves in some upcoming surprises, we have one last morning of sharp, high-impact discussions ahead. And we're kicking it off with a topic that sounds small in name, but big in complexity. Welcome to Plenary 6, Minority Shareholding and Cross-Directorship in Merger Control, where seemingly modest positions that can, in the right or wrong circumstances, wield significant competitive influence. This session will be exploring where the lines are drawn. When does a 10%, 15%, or even a 5% stake become enough to influence strategy or outcomes? Or when does sitting on 2 boards start to look like you're actually sitting on a competition problem? And where's the line between passive investment and potential coordination? Our expert panel will be guiding us this morning through these thorny but fascinating questions, drawing from real-world experiences and diverse enforcement experiences. And moderating this timely discussion today, we have with us Mr. Ryan Linhoutz, Major Case Director and Strategic Policy Advisor at the Competition Bureau of Canada. And joining him on the panel, Mr. Arpit Gupta, Deputy Director at the Competition Commission of India, Mr. Fouad Hosseinian, Partner at McFarlane's Sweden, Mr. Mark Rayson, Director at Raycole RGmbH, Germany, and Mrs. Lawrence Berry, Partner at Herbert Smith, Freehills Kramer, France. So get ready for a session that might make you rethink what minor really means. Mr. Linhoutz, the mic is all yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this final morning of the workshop, which is that's very sad that it's the final morning, but hopefully we can lift your spirits with a lively discussion around minority interests and cross-directorships. So I think, on the face of it, the core tools or analysis for assessing minority interests might appear not to be as new as some of the other topics we've been discussing so far. I mean, the RPs sort of reflect a consensus already that minority investments can contribute to unilateral effects by dampening incentives to compete or to coordination, for example, by facilitating exchange of CSI. But I think in some ways minority interests have also become relevant in new ways. So I'm thinking, for example, of the growing attention and still somewhat new attention to common ownership by institutional investors and the rising impact of that in the economy overall. And also, for example, recent cases that remind us of the interplay between minority interest review under merger control and also behavioral rules that might still apply. It's also an area where there's some divergence between jurisdictions just in terms of their laws and approaches to capturing minority interests, for example, under merger control. So I'm thinking of standards on material influence, control, specific thresholds. And then in some cases, as we'll hear in a moment, approaches in that respect are changing as well. So we'll try to explore all of that and the challenges that are faced by practitioners and agencies with our distinguished panel. I was planning to spend time on introductions, but we've already heard those a little bit. So if you'll forgive me, maybe we'll move straight to the discussion. So maybe to start, as the representative economist on the panel, maybe you can sort of set the stage for us, kick us off by telling us a little bit about a reminder on why we look at these minority investments from an economic point of view and what that tells us about the potential harm that can be associated with these.
Sure, and thank you. Thank you for having me over. So in theory, when we look at minority acquisitions and common ownership, you know, it is the simultaneous ownership of shares in more than one entity. Now, the recent studies have linked the common ownership to competition concerns. In particular, there are theories that this will dampen the competition. There will be lesser incentives to compete amongst the parties. And it involves, because common ownership means minority acquisitions, it is often missed by merger control legislations and does not come under the purview of any scrutiny. The common ownership itself does not mean that there is some control that is being acquired. So what we really need to distinguish is between an active control where the parties are solely or jointly along with other shareholders getting any control or influence in the targets in which they are acquiring, or is it merely non-controlling, which is a pure financial investment and they do not have any influence or control in the target in which they're acquiring stake. Now, there will not necessarily be full control. There are various degrees of control, and hence that can trigger notification or scrutiny of those minority investments as well. Now, the underlying premise is that there should be healthy competition in the market, and the firm should take their decisions independently. However, if there are structural links between the firms, this can be jeopardized. So there can be unilateral effects, joint maximization strategies, the pricing incentives can be affected, and there can obviously be access to commercially sensitive information. The fact that sometimes the shareholding is reciprocal only enhances these anti-competitive concerns. Now, if there is any form of control, it should come under the scrutiny of the jurisdictions. Minority control can be seen in various forms. So there could be an entity A having stake in entity B. There could be a reciprocal stake with both A and B have stake in each other. And there could be a form where C, which is usually an institutional investor, holding stake in both A and B. And A and B do not have any cross-shareholding amongst themselves. Common directors is a phenomena where we normally look at it where there is a common director appointed on board of one or more companies, along with some minority acquisitions that have occurred. The common directors also can take various forms. So it can be horizontal or vertical, depending on the nature of the businesses of the entities and how they may be linked to each other in the supply chain. And it could also be direct or indirect. When we are looking at the competition concerns, the theory of harm is that the fact that the entities are supposed to operate independently would no longer be able to do so. There could be unilateral effects, or there could be coordination amongst the entities. Now, any active influence by shareholders through diversified holdings may not even be required. Common ownership by institutional investors can lead to competition problems, especially higher prices. What we see that there should be an incentive by the investing company or the institutional investor. There should be an incentive to dampen the competition, and it should also have the ability to do so by influencing the firm's management or by getting some access which it normally need not have. So the structure can facilitate any exchange of information, influence in corporate decisions. It can harmonize strategies, and it can lead to tacit or reduced competition. Now, cross-directorship can reduce independent strategic behavior. It can partially impact prices and output, and it could also lead to reduced innovation in the markets. In cross-ownership, or cross-directorship, there is a common director on the board, which has access to both the entities' information, and hence there is an increased risk of collusion. The risk is that even in minority interest, there can be exchange of sensitive information or aligned incentives between the competitors. So the competition authorities scrutinize these arrangements because they can blunt rivalry or lead to deadlocks in decision making. The two main theories of harm is the unilateral effects and the coordinated effects. So in the unilateral effects, it's the investor need not necessarily influence the conduct of the firm in which it is investing. It has a minority acquisition along with host of other rights. These rights are enough to take decisions on its own. It knows the practice or the conduct of the firm in which it has invested. And if it's an institutional investor, it also has the access to the other competing agency. So even without telling the target in which it has acquired stake what to do and what not to do, it has the information through which it can tell the other firm what it has to do. If they are in the same business or if they are linked structurally, even in such cases, the fact that it has access to the information, it can act unilaterally. If there is information on what the pricing of the competitors are going to be or what new products are going to be launched in the market, it can act accordingly. In case it tries to increase its prices and that could lead to certain diversion of its customers to its competitors in which it is holding another stake, that would also be recouped by way of either dividends or profits raised by the competing firm. And hence in net, the institutional investor or the common owner is not at a loss. So by way of unilateral effects, there can be a reduced competitive scenario in the markets. The level of ownership, if the level of ownership increases, then the probability of these unilateral effects is higher. It's also higher when the number of firms tied up are more. The magnitude of this effect is even higher when the structural links are reciprocal. The second major theory of harm is making the coordinated effects. Now, here it could also be some governance rights, such as a board seat or an observer in the target. And along with these rights, the parties can influence the conduct of the firm in which it has acquired the stake. And hence, there could be some sort of collusion or coordination between the parties. In case of an institutional investor which is acquiring stake in multiple entities and having governance rights or access to commercially sensitive information, that could actually lead to having a sort of a cartel where the institutional investor could act as a ringmaster, where it is drawing the commercially sensitive information of various entities in which it has invested, and that is passed on to the other entities, and the institutional investor is then monitoring how the firms are behaving in the market so that the profits are maximized across all the firms in which it has invested. Now, the overall impact of the common ownership is the likelihood of tacit collusion, and that depends significantly on the nature of the industry as well. So it can be based on various factors, such as homogeneous products or the number of players in the market. A partial acquisition can lessen competition by giving the partial owner the ability to influence the competitive conduct of the target firm. For example, voting interest in the target firm or specific governance rights, such as the right to appoint directors, influence capital budgets, determining investment return thresholds, or selecting particular managers or KMPs, can create such an influence. Because this increases transparency across the firms, it negatively impacts the firm's incentives to compete and facilitates coordination. Other theories of harm can also include influence over strategic decisions such as pricing or entry into newer markets, input or customer foreclosure. So even without control, partial ownership can distort incentives of the target firms. So there are some mechanisms through which it can be done. The first is the voting mechanism. So when a firm acquires in entities, it need not have a majority of the voting rights as well. Even a minority of voting rights can help it achieve its purpose, especially where the overall voting of the company is noted to be much significantly less than 100%. So where a lot of shareholders are not voting regularly in the voting rights, having even a small voting rights can trigger, it can cross the thresholds of say 25%, where you can block special resolutions. So you need not have a majority over those voting rights. So in a lot of cases, the institutional investors nowadays even tend to own much more than the minority stake, and hence they have a larger proportion of shares. Also, if these investors come along and vote as a block, then there could be a vote which is in their favor. The second way in which they can influence is by way of voice, which is actually more informal. It could also lead to better effects where they actually engage formally or informally with either the promoters or the management of the company and tend to sway the decision in their favor. Since they're already a shareholder in the company, it makes them easier to interact with these firms. So these are some of the theories of harm that we will look at.
Okay, thanks very much, Arpit, for that overview of the issues. That's really helpful. So, Mark, maybe if we turn now to the, as I said, the approach to actually assessing these issues under merger control itself varies across jurisdictions, and maybe you can provide your perspective on those different approaches.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you very much, and thanks for the ICN for having me here as well. Actually, sort of listening to Arpit now, it was amazing. I think we actually should be very much afraid of the world coming to a sudden end right now, at least as far as competition is concerned, because apparently there's so much going on in the area of minority investments, lots of different theories of harm, and it looks really serious. And which brings me actually to the point where, as Ryan suggested, I would take a step back and think about how should one approach this sort of on a more conceptual level. You've given a lot of detail that I'll try to keep out of my presentation, but I'd like to take a step back because I've recently had an opportunity to do a little survey for a client about merger control notifications worldwide. And that captured, I think it was 165 jurisdictions overall. And I yesterday had another look at the survey, and I realized only 20 jurisdictions have or capture minority acquisitions as part of their merger control rules, and capture those minority acquisitions provided they don't give the parties control over the target. And I think we'll come back to that later on. So I'll sort of just talk about minority acquisitions, referring to acquisitions that do not provide control over the target. So the question for those 145 jurisdictions that don't have a system that captures those minority participations is probably sort of, how do we deal with this? Why haven't we looked at it yet? And should we? And should we introduce a system? And how should it look like in broader terms? And perhaps a good starting point to sort of think about this is to look at sort of the function of merger control in any given jurisdiction. And I think it's fair to say that when we look at merger control, the basic assumption is that those rules should capture changes to the structure of competition in the market, whereas behavior rules, on the other side, should do what the label says, capture the behavior of otherwise independent undertakings. You could also say, as the European Commission did in its 2014 white paper, that enforcing structural rules, merger control, is basically forward-looking in that they capture the effects that will be caused by a transaction in the future, while the enforcement of behavior rules actually looks at current and past behavior of the companies in question. The problem that any jurisdiction will face is that only some types of cases will clearly fall into either camp. The acquisition of control changes market structures. Where you had two players before, ultimately, after consummation of the transaction, there's only one left. Cartels, on the other hand, are straightforward cases for the application of behavioral rules. But how do you deal with the cases in the middle, in particular situations where minority stakes are acquired? They have elements of both. They have structural changes. The acquisition of equity transfers the shares on a durable basis. But they also have behavioral elements, and Arpit, I think we've heard a lot of these, post-closing, putting shareholder representatives on management boards, and information flows, I think, are the ones that cause most concern. So how do you deal with these cases? Any jurisdiction has to find its own answer. From a dogmatic point of view, and being German, I'm probably one of the very few people here in the room who doesn't treat being called dogmatic as an insult. So I'll start with that quickly. From a dogmatic point of view, the challenge is to address how this type of transaction may directly cause competitive harm, and how, basically, to define directly. This is not just a formal issue, but it goes to the heart of the substantive review. But more importantly, perhaps, is the finding of a strategic answer when you think about how to define a system, a merger control system that should capture minority acquisitions. Most importantly, I think the key question really is, where does one see the biggest challenges to competition? And how can you most effectively address that? Understand which potential competitive harm out of the long list is to be addressed by the regime and tailor it accordingly. Second, and I think this is often forgotten, the modus operandi of the authority is relevant. Is the authority more focused on forward-looking quasi-regulation, so that merger control be the most effective way of dealing with problems? Or do you follow more of an after-the-fact enforcement approach? Thirdly, the structure of local markets is relevant as well. Is your jurisdiction one with a large incumbent players that may have a tendency to deter competition, even if the owners of competitors may profit from that? Or is there a fear that cross-minority shareholdings may give effect to what at worst are cartelized markets? It is important to tailor the scope of review to most effectively address your local situation. Fourthly, the effects on business operating in the jurisdictions should be considered, especially concerning notification obligations, review timelines, and the extent of information required are relevant in that context. And as a German lawyer, I come from a jurisdiction that both captures minority acquisitions and also, and at the same time, has a very flexible system of notifying those mergers, so that sort of the intensity of both the requirements as well as the scrutiny is basically tailored to the potential problem we're looking at. One important question also is whether your local effects doctrine is sufficiently robust to only capture transactions with appreciable local effects. You don't really want to be sort of faced with a lot of transactions that happen elsewhere just because your jurisdictional test is too broad. Fifthly, the level of financial and market share thresholds that would trigger notification requirements needs to be considered, because they will have an impact not just on the work that the companies will have to do, but also on the wave of cases that may be heading in the agency's direction. And finally, practical considerations play a role. In a resource-constrained world, legislators as well as agencies must decide where to spend their often not unlimited resources. Where does the field we're talking here about rank in order of importance relative to other tasks the agency needs to complete? So, having gone through those points, I think the question sort of remains, which types of transactions do you actually want to capture? And there sort of, I think there's different levels of intensity that can be used as a benchmark. If you apply a hands-off approach as an agency, and as far as minority acquisitions are concerned, you will only choose to capture acquisitions of control in the context of your merger system. And that is indeed what the majority of the jurisdictions so far have done. You know, the overwhelming majority of jurisdictions have done. A more interventionist approach defines concentrations as transactions which reach a certain level of minority shareholding or voting rights. It is important to take that into account because sometimes the two may diverge, and sort of even though the shareholding that is acquired may be small, the power you can influence if these come with additional voting rights may actually be much greater than the level of shareholding. So that needs to be kept in mind. And those levels, from what I've seen, are sort of usually set at either a third of the shares or votes, 25% or 10%. The decision here depends on the type of concern that major control is asked to address. If the concern is effective interference with the business behavior of the target, and we've heard a lot about that, a non-trivial level of shareholding may be appropriate. We're talking about blocking certain types of decisions in the board of shareholders. If, on the other hand, the fear is that the shareholding may be used as a basis for illegal conduct, for example, the sharing of sensitive information or actually market collusion, that may justify a much lower threshold because the level of shareholding is basically irrelevant once the opportunity is created. Going even further, and this is what the Germans have done, along with some other jurisdiction, it will allow any structural link, usually a smaller shareholding, even below 10%, to be sufficient if it is combined with additional factors that may facilitate the exercise of competitive and material influence. These factors can either relate to the position in the target itself. Those would be guaranteed seats on the board of directors, for example, veto rights that go beyond what the shareholding would allow the shareholder to exercise, or sort of even the right to be heard before decisions are taken. On the other hand, there can be external relationships between the shareholder and the target. And again, from my German experience, I've seen a lot of these cases where minority acquisitions are basically done in the context of more broadly defined cooperation agreements. So these may be actually plus factors that, if you have them in addition to the shareholding, could trigger a merger control requirements. And at the end of the scale, you may have associative agreements. And at least one jurisdiction comes to mind, that is Brazil, which may, under certain circumstances, actually cover contractual joint ventures where you don't actually have any acquisition of shares, but where sort of the contract itself is the basis for merger control. So this is basically the range of options any jurisdiction has when thinking about sort of where to sort of put the dial, whether you want to sort of be really involved in these kinds of transactions or whether you want to take more of a hands-off approach. At any rate, it's always good to avoid the pitfalls that are associated with these sorts of regimes. And one of the first things I would probably want to say here is that the use of formal definitions that are straightforward to apply actually avoids confusion and makes life and enforcement much easier for all involved. Especially when introducing a new system, it may be good to avoid using substantive terms in order to define concentrations. So, you know, for the newcomers, I would really say stay away from definitions such as material influence or competitively significant influence. Sorry to the Bundeskartellamt. To stay away from these initially to sort of get the system get a system that everyone understands, that's easy to apply, and that still captures sort of broadly what you want to achieve. Similarly, applying a system only to acquisitions of horizontally or vertically related companies, that's the approach the European Commission suggested in 2014, I think, is fraught with difficulties because it's again sort of a question of definition, whether there are horizontal relationships or not. So in terms of achieving legal certainty, it's better to stay away from that sort of a factor or parameter for defining concentrations. Take into account, that's what I said earlier as well, what's expected from companies, as well as from the case officers who have to process the required information. Casting nets wide is actually more effective if the data requirements are limited, can be handled easily, and perhaps even left up to the parties to decide what's necessary to make their case. Ideally, notifications of no-issues cases can be a brief narrative. A similar low-impact approach might be the targeted transparency system, which, again, the EU proposed in 2014, that would simply require an information notice combined with subsequent call-in powers of the agency. And finally, I would suggest it's important to be realistic in defining what you wish for and how it will benefit competition in your jurisdiction. Stakeholders will judge you by how well you deal with a fish that your self-defined net has caught. Thank you. Right, back to you.
Thanks very much, Mark. Maybe I'll turn it right to Laurence. Do you want to respond on, oh, you need a mic for that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to react on this idea of the jurisdictions that rely on the notion of control being more hands-off. Obviously, that's true in a way, but I wanted to point out that, and RPT alluded to that, the notion of control still allows us to capture a number of acquisition of minority shareholding, as long as those minority shareholdings allow you to exert decisive influence on the target. And we have seen in the past at the European level and in France a number of cases where actually our jurisdictional thresholds were able to capture acquisitions of minority stakes as low as 20 or 30%. And basically you have three ways to do that. The first is the arising of de facto control based on the structure of the shareholding, meaning that you have a minority shareholders and the rest of the shareholding is very diversified and people don't necessarily vote in the assemblies. That's what you mentioned. The second case, it's more rare, but it happens, is the idea that, and it's actually reflected in paragraph 20 of the consolidated jurisdictional notice of the Commission, is this idea that in some cases, minority shareholding plus long-term contracts can be enough to characterize control, and that, I think, captures a number of the theories of harm you've mentioned. And then the third situation that can and has arisen, thinking about an old case, but the Renault-Nissan case before the Commission, is that the idea that when you're taking a minority shareholding in your competitor and the other shareholders are purely financial advisor or other shareholders who are not that invested and interested in the business, that in itself can give you that decisive influence over the target so that you can do a lot of the things that you describe, Arpit. So yes, of course, jurisdiction like the EU, France, where you have that notion of control, mainly targets majority shareholdings, but I don't think we're entirely powerless to also review and analyze a number of the issues that have been raised so far.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. So maybe we'll turn to the practice. As I understand it, in India, some of this thinking has led to some amendments, changes in approach. So maybe you can tell us a bit about what it's meant in that jurisdiction.
Sure. So India actually follows a mandatory and suspensionary regime for the combination notices. And we are only 14 years old. So we were developing a lot of our own jurisprudence in this aspect. And in 2023, our legislative got amended, which was enacted in 2024. And along with that, we did have the opportunity to revise various of our regulations and rules as well. So we tried to incorporate everything that we were doing in practice for the last 10 years or so into the rules and regulations as well as the main legislative content, so that it gives more certainty to the stakeholders of how we are viewing this position. So I'll give you certain instances where what we have really changed in our act and the legislation. So the previous act, the Competition Act 2002, defined control, but it only said that control includes controlling affairs or management of one or more enterprise, either jointly or singly, over another enterprise or group, or its one or more groups, either jointly or singly, over another group or enterprise. So while this was a very broad definition of control, how we've really amended this is now to include that control means the ability to exercise material influence in any manner whatsoever over the management or affairs or strategic commercial decisions. So we've inserted these words where we've added material influence and also tried to qualify it, what we really intend by this addition. So we are also bringing in, widening the definition, so to say, of the aspect of control in the merger regulation. Along with that, in the previous regulations, we also had certain exemptions provided to the parties, where the presumption was that such kind of mergers and acquisitions do not normally lead to any anti-competitive harms. And hence we had given a provision to the parties that they may not file with the commission. One of such provisions was that in case an entity was acquiring less than 25% stake over another entity, which was either solely as an investment or in its ordinary course of business, and which was not leading to acquisition of control, so such acquisitions were not to be notified to the commission. And we've also clarified this by saying that if it's under 10%, it is solely as an investment, where they are not getting any board seat or any rights which are not available to the ordinary shareholders of the company. And also, we had said that there was no intent to participate in the management or the affairs of the company. So this was the previous regulation which gave certain benefits. However, we realized that this was leading to some kind of misunderstanding with the parties in how they were defining solely as an investment or an ordinary course of business, because that was leading to various gun jumping provisions, violations, where the parties were going ahead with their transactions, thinking that it is solely as an investment or in their ordinary course of business, especially with the institutional investors, and hence not notifying. So we did levy some penalties there, and we tried to give more clarity by way of our jurisprudence and the FAQs that we had issued, where we clarified that what control means, that it's a degree, material influence is the lowest form of control, and if you are to acquire the control, even if it's in lowest form, you need to notify. And we'd also clarified what ordinary course of business means, and where the parties need to notify, how it is distinct from pure financial investment, or what the activities of the institutional investors are. While we had a set jurisprudence under the previous regulations, when we did get the opportunity to revise our new rules, we've now given a pure exemption to the parties, and we've also tried to clarify these two terms upfront, so that when they are acquiring a minority stake, they know where to notify and where not to notify. So as a result of that, we have first clarified what the ordinary course of business means. And what we've covered under that is a covenants under the underwriting agreements, the stockbrokers' activities, and mutual funds in India. So we've covered these as the ordinary course of business and excluded the institutional investors from this category, hence giving more clarity. Second, we have also now put solely as investment and ordinary course of business in two separate buckets. So that forms another part of the rules. Where solely as an investment, we've written, again, it's less than 25% of acquisition of stake, not leading to control. But we have clarified that this will be considered solely as an investment where the acquirer does not gain a right or the ability to represent on the board of the directors or have an observer on the board. We have said that it does not gain any commercially sensitive information of the target in which it is acquiring stake. We've said that the acquirer and the target should not have any overlaps, so horizontal, vertical, or complementary overlaps between the parties. And we've also added a provision saying that they can acquire minority stake, but in case they are crossing a 10% threshold, then they need to notify. So we've kept the 10% threshold. So under 10% without any of the rights mentioned, they can go ahead with the transaction. But if they're crossing 10%, even without these rights, they need to notify to the commission. Along with that, we also have an affiliate test, which is normally used to see the affiliates of the institutional investors and with whom the overlaps have to be considered. So the change in that has happened is that earlier we used to call an affiliate which has either more than 10% or any observer or both seat or any other rights which are not available to ordinary shareholders. The issue there was that there were a host of rights which are normally acquired by the parties, but these rights are not available to ordinary shareholders, but they necessarily do not give the acquirer any advantage over the target in terms of either strategic commercial decisions or any competitively sensitive information. Hence, we've narrowed it down to only CSI. So that also gives a little indication where we are trying to now look at the whole bucket of rights that the acquirers usually get and what holds significance when they are holding stake in multiple entities. Along with this, the new rules also have various exemptions of creeping acquisitions. So where the parties are within certain brackets, say from 0 to 25%, and they're doing creeping acquisitions without any additional rights being acquired in each of the round, they need not notify. Similarly, we have a bracket between 25 to 30%, 25 to 50%. That's because at 25%, as per our laws, we trigger the negative control where the parties do get the ability to block, to start voting in the company. At 50%, it becomes a subsidiary, and then again at 75%, the ability to have the special resolutions passed in their favor. So we have these three thresholds, and if you're moving between the thresholds of say 0 to 25, and there is no change in the rights or the control, then you need not notify to the commission. So we do look at minority acquisitions very plainly. We have given certain exemptions which were earlier at the option of the parties, but which now fall purely as exemptions. And where we see that either there will be no change in control, or if there was a control previously acquired by the parties, there's nothing new that is happening because of the transaction, and hence it gives out more clarity. And so far this has been implemented for over a year now, and we've not seen any gun jumping case so far. So hopefully we've satisfied the purpose of giving some certainty to the stakeholders.
Thanks, Arpit. That's really helpful. So I guess we've been talking a lot about what transactions are captured, and Fuad, maybe one thing that comes up, I guess, under those jurisdictions is you may have minority interests that are relevant to the merger control, but then behavioral rules continue to apply, not directly analogous, but maybe delivery hero cases, and is a reminder of that. So maybe can you give us your perspective on those types of cases or other challenges that come up in these minority interest reviews?
Sure. How are we doing on timing? We also want to leave room for questions.
We still have some time.
Okay, good. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Maybe if I could just start with something that we all take for given, for taken, and maybe I've forgotten to mention this morning and maybe across the days here, is that I think everybody agrees that investments are good, you know, as a basis. So in particular, investments are good. And if you have that as a starting point, and we try to structure, you know, what we're discussing here today and what the cases tell us, and one could look at the regulatory burden, and then the policy approach to how to treat minority shareholdings, and then the substantive assessment of the theories of harm. And the regulatory burden, I think that's quite obvious. If you're doing a minority share investment and you happen to have some competitive overlap, it's actually more challenging in a way, or the regulatory burden is higher than if you were just doing a full-blown merger. You need first to go through the notification process in those jurisdictions that require that, and typically the information requirements are the same, and the process is the same as if you would have done a full-blown merger. But once you've been through that and all the theories of harm have been tested, and if the authority doesn't intervene, then you're still afterwards, after closing, subject to the behavior rules, which you are not if you do a full-blown merger. So the regulatory burden continues after the minority investment, with you know, the requirements of information barriers and not to coordinate, which all makes sense. But in a way, you know, what one needs to bear in mind is that the regulatory burden will have an effect on impact and appetite for investments. I don't know if you've seen, but recently the European Commission published its annual report on FDI. And, you know, after a few years now, when most European countries have FDI regimes, surprise, surprise, investments in Europe are decreasing, which is, of course, might be good, but most likely not the effect that we wanted. Now, when it comes to policy approach, you know, you could take two approaches. You could say, okay, we'll look at minority investments, but it should be limited to, in merger control, to just economic incentives of what are the incentives or ability to act in a harmful way, rather than assuming that they would act as one unit and kind of raise prices or reduce output. But you could also, on the other hand, say, well, the whole point of merger control is to be ex ante, to try to prevent harm before it happens. And there are good examples of that. That's the Delivery Hero case, for instance, where, for those of you who are not aware of it, you know, two kind of delivery platforms, Delivery Hero and Global Hero. Sorry. Investment in Glovo, and the first agency to pick up on that and understand that it was anti-competitive was actually the Egyptian Competition Authority, and they reacted very fast, because Glovo announced in 2018, I think, or 19, that they were exiting the Egyptian market, and within a month from that announcement, the Egyptian Competition Authority ordered them to stop withdrawing from the Egyptian market, and made an investigation, and came to the conclusion that as a result of that investment, there had been strategic influence and coordination, so essentially a cartel. So they took that decision under cartel rules, because at the time the Egyptian authority did not have merger control rules to implement. And it took many years later, more than 6 years later, for European Commission to come to the same conclusion, because obviously the parties continued with that implementation of the process in other countries, in particular in Europe. Now, you could argue that the harm was there, at least in Europe, because it took so much longer for European Commission to intervene. You could argue that if that had been notified, subject to notification, maybe it wouldn't have happened. But again, there are jurisdictions such as UK, CMA, where, as Mark mentioned, it's more on a voluntary basis. So there's a trade-off. Not all transactions have to be notified. It's voluntary, and the authority can call them in. So there's a very interesting case, Ryanair, Aer Lingus. Most of you must have heard about it. It's quite old by now, where Ryanair acquired around 30% of the shares in Aer Lingus, just below the mandatory bid requirement. It wasn't notifiable to European Commission, but CMA intervened and ultimately forced them to sell down. And the theories they looked at was not so much collusion, but they said there's quite obvious that there's an incentive and ability with 29% of a share in a competitor that you will be able to harm your competitor. You will scare off other investors. You might not let them expand to other routes. You know, kind of very sensible types of theories of harm. And I think this is coming back. So if you look now at tech-driven and innovation-driven markets, where you would have seen that CMA has also intervened, or at least investigated Amazon's investment, minority investment in Deliveroo, and OpenAI and Microsoft. This is the same kind of approach they're taking, in the sense not whether there will be too much of a market power because of these minority investments, but more what is the incentive. So in Amazon Deliveroo, ultimately CMA didn't do anything, but what they looked at, they were saying, okay, Amazon had a food delivery service itself. It didn't work out, so they exited the market. And now they're making an investment in Deliveroo. So I think intuitively you would say, well, that's a proof that they are not competitors, because they tried, they failed, so they're not even potential competitors. But what the CMA was saying is that, well, they could have, in a few years again tried to enter the market because it's, something that's important, and by acquiring a minority stake in Deliveroo, it kind of takes out their incentive and the competitive pressure. Ultimately, and they were also saying they will earn money on this adjacent market by just having the investment instead of going in themselves. Ultimately, they couldn't substantiate these theories of harm, so they didn't intervene. And in Microsoft OpenAI, again, type of looking into how much of a control or how much of an influence would Microsoft have into OpenAI. But the underlying theory of harm is, of course, again, will this kind of stifle innovation and not make OpenAI as a competitive force to Microsoft in the future? So I think, these things make sense and are important, but of course it's again a trade-off. You still want investments to flow into your jurisdiction and country. And I think Laurence will talk more about when you have common ownership, so not necessarily between competitors. And we have seen in jurisdictions where that also has been seen as a problem. And the question is whether there is any actual economic basis for that.
Thanks, Bud. To be frank, a lot of these discussions before minority stakes in competitors and things like that started with this idea 10 years ago now, that in some sectors you can have the same investors, usually financial investors, and usually, let's be clear, asset managers, that has an importance, who hold shares in a number of competitors, or even in all competitors in one industry, and that could have an impact on the level of competition in that industry. That was one of the issues that was raised by the European Commission in Bayer, Monsanto, and Dow DuPont. the idea that you had between 17 and 20 asset managers holding shares that amounted all in all to between 20 and 30% in all competitors in the chemical business, and that could decrease the incentive of those companies to compete. You had the airline study in the US showing that same thing. The BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street of this world hold combined significant shares in all the 5 major US industries, and that could have led to a decrease in competition between those airlines. And recently, as Paul mentioned, there has been an action by the Texas State AG in the US against BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard because they were allegedly colluding on ESG objectives, pushing all companies in Texas to take the same steps to reduce their CO2 emissions. So this idea that common ownership, when it's done by asset managers, could lead to a decrease in competition is interesting. It's not that it's impossible, but I think that when we look at that, we also need to be reminded of what asset managers really are. And decrease in competition through minority shareholding amount to 2 things: ability and incentive. And in that case, it's important to underline that both ability and incentive are very limited. Ability first. Obviously, we're not here talking about any form of control. We're far below that. And in the case of asset managers, there are 2 things that really limit the ability of the influence that they can have on their portfolio company. The first thing is that there is a limit on the shareholding that they can hold in any company. In Europe, the UCITS directive limits the amount of shareholding any asset manager can have in a company to 10%. So that's very low. We're not talking about 20, we're not talking about 30. That's the first thing. The second thing is that they're actually also constrained by rules on voting. Asset managers have to publish the way they vote, and they have to have guidelines for that. So actually, they do vote their shares. There has been a debate some time ago but they do vote their shares, so they do exert their influence. They do vote their share. They are legally obliged to do so, but they vote their share in a way that is predetermined and cannot change depending on whether it would be best for them to go for or against a proposal by the management, for example. Most asset managers will always vote with management because that's what they have committed to do. That's an important point. I think the second and more important point is really the incentive. And there I would like to go back to the airline study because it's very interesting. So the airline study tells us, so you have those asset managers and together they hold significant shares in all the 5 major airline companies in the US. What you see when you look more granularly is that asset managers actually don't hold anything. They create mutual funds, and those mutual funds actually hold share in the companies. And if you look at the level of the funds, and each funds are managed differently because each fund have different objectives. They have different investors, and they need to achieve certain goals which are different depending on the fund. And so if you look at the disaggregated ownership in those airlines, you find that actually there was about 20 funds holding shares in those companies, and of those funds, only one held share in all the airlines. Others, majority of the funds only held share in one airline. Some of the funds held share in 2 or 3 airlines. A number of the funds held share in 4 airlines, and then just one in all 5. What does that mean? That means that, well, obviously for the funds who held share in just one airline, their incentive is for that airline to actually compete very strongly with the others, because that's how they maximize revenues for their investors. Even for the funds who held share in 4 airlines, but not the last one, maximizing revenues for their investors mean that those 4 airlines should go very strongly against the 5th one. So if you disaggregate the way the shares are held, then you reach a very different result. And the last point I want to raise on that is that I say maximize revenues for their investors. And that's an important thing, because obviously we think as asset managers as having an incentive to maximize revenues for their investors. But actually, the asset managers' revenues are not, in 90% of the cases, based on the revenues they create for their investors. They actually have fixed commission that don't rely on how the funds perform. Usually, most of these funds are passive funds. They're just there to mirror an index. They can minor CAC 40 in France. They minor indexes all over the world, but they're not supposed to actually. It's not a minority shareholding like the one we talked about before, where you really want to maximize profits that you get from your investment. There is just a way to make sure you follow the market. And so these asset managers are not paying more because actually one of the company in which they invest makes more money. So it's very important to keep in mind. Does that mean that the BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street never actually try to influence what their portfolio companies are doing? No, we've seen it in Texas. Whether it's an antitrust violation is a question, but what we know is that in Texas they have actually been very vocal on the fact that all companies should all try to be better to fulfill their ESG goals. But I think that in itself is interesting, because in that case, they might have an incentive to actually try to engage with their portfolio companies, but it's not on something that is directly commercial behavior. It's more social. And they don't do that through their minority shareholding. Actually, what the state AG has said is that they use the press, they used articles, they use general engagement that is not directly linked to their minority shareholding. And I think it's interesting that the FTC and DOJ felt forced to actually say this case should not lead us to put an overall ban on common ownership by asset managers, because that's not what we see in practice.
Thanks, Laurence. Just being conscious of time, so I think the discussion around the extent or mechanisms for asset manager influence, whether managerial incentives, informal meetings with management, et cetera, is ongoing. But maybe you can tell us in practice what you've seen in India, and we'll for about 5 minutes, and then we'll leave a few minutes for questions.
So yes, where there are concerns, there always be remedies. So I'll discuss some of the cases that we've encountered over the last few years regarding minority acquisitions and common ownerships. For instance, there was a case where General Atlantic Fund was acquiring stake in an entity called Acotec. Now, this in itself was not so much of an issue, but Acotec had minority stake. In turn, it had minority stake in an entity which was making an app which was called MyGate, which was used by societies for their entry and exit. And General Atlantic, through its other funds, also had stake in an entity which was making similar apps, and again a minority stake there. Directly through the other entity, as well as indirectly through Acotec, where it was now acquiring stake, and Acotec in turn having minority stake and some rights in MyGate. There was a theory of harm that there will be coordination between the two platforms, and there will be some coordination. When we looked at the market position, these two together constituted a majority of the market. Hence, there were remedies in particular case. The case was approved conditionally, where the mean was that General Atlantic would not participate, associate with, or exert influence in any matter relating to the investment of the Acotec, which is the direct acquirer, relating to its acquisition in Vivish, which was the app in which it had invested. A General Atlantic will not access, knowingly receive, or become privy to any non-public information relating to Vivish, which would have come to the knowledge of Acotec. It would not influence or engage with any person appointed by Acotec as an observer on the board of Vivish or in its any other capacity. So there was a complete firewall between the information that would flow right up to the General Atlantic Fund, and hence there could not have been any possible collision between the two apps. Another very interesting case that we had a couple of years back was the investment by Chris Capital Group through various of its funds in a pharmaceutical company in India, which was Intas. So they already had 3% stake, and they were now acquiring another 3% and going up to almost 6%. When this merger was notified to the commission, it was realized that Chris Capital also had 4 other investments in pharmaceutical sector in India. In one was a pure financial investment where they did not have any other rights, but there were 3 other entities where they were holding various rights. And along with this current 3% stake acquisition in Intas, they were also acquiring a lot of governance rights in the company. So the rights that they were acquiring right now included right to receive information about the affairs of Intas, right to appoint a director on the board of Intas, right to veto certain corporate actions such as amendment to the charter documents, commencement of new line of business, and change in the capital structure. Now, there was a holistic approach that was followed regarding the shareholding that it acquired, that it was proposing to acquire in Intas, along with the rights, as well as what the extent of rights would give Chris Capital entities in the target, and the other rights that it was holding in the other 3 portfolio companies, which were GVK, Curato, and Mankind. Now, after the assessment was conducted, it was felt that the ability to influence the strategic focus and operations is definitely there with the Chris Capital entities. One of their portfolio companies, Mankind and Intas, were direct competitors in various products, and hence there was a position to both unilaterally and coordinated effects between the parties. It had various strategic veto rights where it could influence the affairs of both the companies. It also had access to non-public information, and this would have had lead to various effects such as allocation of product or geographic market or customers in the reduced incentive to innovate in pharmaceutical industry, price arrangements, and bid rigging. So there was, the commission did approve the case along with certain conditions. So the modification include the removal of the director from the board of Mankind, which was their previous portfolio entity, restrict the use of information relating to the current target as well as the previous portfolio entities, not to exercise veto rights in Mankind in relation to the change in capital structure, M&A activities, amendment to memorandum and articles of association, commencement of any new business, with certain limited exemption to protect the extent of its shareholding investments of the acquirer. So the proportionality of the remedies was taken into consideration, and the merger was approved with certain conditions.
Thanks, Arpit. Very efficient summary given how much there was to go. Last word to Mark, and then
Yeah, just a very quick word to pick up on one thing that Vogt said, and I think which is really truly important to remember in this context, that when a company acquires a minority shareholding in a competitor, that doesn't mean that behavioral antitrust rules do not continue to apply, right? So, you know, and this is why I actually find it very interesting to hear from you. You know, that one of the theories of harm is, you know, you acquire this shareholding and then you will have information about the competitive behavior. No, you won't, right? Because you can't, because antitrust law still applies to your minority shareholding and what you do with it. So, you know, if a client comes to me and says, you know, I want to do this transaction, buy 20-odd% in my direct competitor, there's basically two conversations we're having. Firstly, about what this does not allow the acquirer to do, right? So it's very important to put into place firewalls between the information that's made available to the board and sort of the acquiring company. So usually you get people who are firewalled sent to the meetings of the board of directors with a clear NDA that they can't take that information back to their company, right? I mean, that's just a normal way of doing antitrust compliance, right? And in the same way, very often sort of representatives of the acquirer recuse themselves from the decisions that will impact sort of the competitive behavior of the target company, right? So this is sort of, I think, antitrust 101 for minority shareholdings. And I think you need to keep that in mind when you think about, you know, do I want to look at these things? I'm not saying you shouldn't, and you shouldn't apply merger control. If you think applying merger control is a way to actually capture cartel behavior and collusion, fair enough, you know, but spell it out. Be honest about it and say, you know, this is our sort of early intervention in terms of collusion, right? The second thing is, I think that's also very important to remember, sort of the business reasons for acquiring a minority share in a competitor very often are other collaborative agreements that the parties sort of want to enter into. So the shareholding basically, and this can be cross-shareholding often, is a sign of commitment to the collaborative project that they're having. So, you know, I think that's important to understand the commercial dynamics of these things as well. What are you looking for? Are you actually saying, and this is what I tell my clients, have you actually done an antitrust review of your collaboration agreement? And you as an authority may have the same approach, right? You say, show me your minority shareholding, and by the way, explain to me what else is there. I think just keeping commercial realities and antitrust 101 in mind is terribly important in this area. Thank you. Brian, question?
Okay, no, I'm just debating. We could keep responding for a while, but I've been boasting all day that we'd finish on time. So, yeah, maybe we can go to questions for a couple minutes.
Do you hear me? Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So just to add a bit to the agency perspective, which maybe was a bit in a minority today. So this topic of cross-ownership, common ownership, as Laurence mentioned, was a very hot topic maybe 10 years ago. There were many cases. You mentioned Dow bought by Monsanto. And I think the theories of harm we focused on back then were really unilateral. So like the unilateral incentives coming from these minority shareholdings. And I think this is really not rocket science. It's very well understood that if companies have shares if investors have shares in many companies in a relevant market, then this reduces the incentive to compete. It increases the incentive to maximize industry profit. And there's also empirical evidence now showing that this changes outcomes and it changes incentives and performance incentives given to managers so that they are, in fact, not maximizing company profits, but industry profits, which means competing less. So this is very well understood. I think we can also then, of course, go to factors that might facilitate collusion, maybe even outright cartelization. That's other issues. But so these basics, I think, are very well understood. And just, I think this panel is a good reminder that we might want to focus more on this again in the future. Thank you.
I just want to ask a question because I don't want to disappoint Mark. Yesterday you commented that I didn't ask a question, so I will do now. So, no, I think there were some very interesting points raised and very varied perspectives, more or less. I mean, what I got from this is we're still struggling with this question in Saudi Arabia, let's put it that way. Recently in merger control, we introduced an exemption for passive investments. Where we basically say if you take a minority stake, even in several companies and so on, that if you actually don't act on it, but only to protect the value of your investment, then that's fine, as long as you don't interfere with the daily operations, strategic decisions. But the only thing is you buy and you sell your shares, basically. That's what a proper investment fund should do, so then there's no issue whatsoever. So the conflict's a little bit what Fard said with every investment good. I think that there we should draw a line somewhere, but I'm just wondering if merger control of minority shares through minorities, not without control, is the answer there. Because I also agree it's a double burden. What Mark also said, you already have the prohibition there. It's already good. So would not a simpler, but perhaps that's something for discussion with the panel, would not a simpler solution be where you basically don't do merger control on true minority shareholders, but basically have a reversal of burden, or of the burden of proof, that if you take an investment in a competitor, that basically then it's upon you to basically to say, okay, there's no anti-competitive effect. So it's very much, you keep it like in the anti-competitive agreement area, because frankly, yes, it can be with cooperation or something, but, and I agree, most of the investment is good, but an investment in a competitor, that is a very big red flag. So I disagree that all investments are good. And like I said, I think that perhaps something could be interesting, where you just say, look, if you invest in an investor, it's very easy for an authority to start an investigation. Now you have to explain that there's actually no anti-competitive effects. Would that be an alternative to having all these burdens? Because what I hear from India is basically enforcing compliance program. What you're basically doing, the Chinese walls is basically, as Mark said, that's what every good lawyer should basically say. If you do that already. So why burden competition authorities and companies with something that they should already do? I just don't see the point. So perhaps reversal of burden would be something.
Specific on this point, on the FDI side of things, there's a solution very similar to the one in Saudi Arabia, whereby in situations where you have a general partner and limited partner, who ends up the limited partner having a shareholding above a certain level, right? There's an exception where it says two things. If you don't have voting rights, it's fine, as long as you don't have privileged access to information about the company. That prevents actually any competitive harm because the information that a shareholder will have would be only financial shareholder. And if that LP, for instance, has a board observer or a board member, then it becomes a filing requirement. So you have to go through the process. But if not, it's a safeguard limiting the competitive harm of having access to information, just financial information, if that's fine, right? Or voting rights. So no say whatsoever in the conduct of the company.
I just wanted to respond to the Saudi Arabia comment. So first of all, I agree that merger control isn't the way to deal with this potential issue, and in most cases, minority interests are a good thing. And so I like your idea about not using merger control in a way which is not really necessary. But on the other hand, then we're relying along the delivery Hero Glovo case on anti-competitive agreements, and your suggestion that perhaps we reverse the burden of proof is one that I wanted to respectfully challenge, because I think that will create additional burden for the companies. So agree with the idea of using the anti-competitive rules, but please let's not reverse the burden of proof.
Can I perhaps suggest a middle way in that? No, because I'm always worried about reversing the burden of proof, in particular when then it becomes a negative fact that you have to prove, i.e. no anti-competitive effects. What I could imagine actually is a situation where the companies then, it would be upon the companies to show that they have taken measures to comply with competition law, right? If the matter ever comes up. But I found it interesting that sort of the Egyptians were the first, who didn't have merger control at all, were the first to sort of catch on to what Delivery Hero did, which basically was a market sharing cartel, no?
But I think Rob's point is not so much the cartelization, it's more about the incentive. So if you invest 5% in your competitor and there is a concentrated market, his point, most of us are lawyers here, Samantha, that's why we don't like the reverse burden of proof, but he's an economist. So his point is, you should show to me, as an economist, that if you acquire 5% in your competitor in a concentrated market, it's not a problem. I don't have a good answer to that, just apart from being a lawyer and don't like reverse burden of proof. But food for thought.
But perhaps to add to that, I'm a lawyer and I'm not an economist, and I'm sure there are theories that sort of make exactly that point, a lessening of competition pressure and all that sort of thing. But I think you also need to be realistic in terms of how businesses operate. I cannot imagine sort of someone in a company putting forward a proposal to acquire 10% of their major competitor with the argument that, well, in that case, we'll raise prices enormously, we'll lose customers, but we'll be incredibly rich because, we get the dividends, 10% of the dividends of our direct competitor. I'm sort of obviously, life just doesn't work that way. It may actually perhaps in sort of some very few cases, but I think as a proposal in terms of, actually this is an acquisition we want to do and this is the reason why we want to do it, that's not realistic. And it is interesting to see that the cases the Commission cited were all, and necessarily, I guess, because they only sort of look at acquisitions of control. But the cases the Commission cited in 2014 to show potential competitive harm were always cases where there was an existing minority shareholding and then sort of control was acquired over a competing undertaking. And I can see that working somehow. But to apply the same reasoning, to turn that around and to say, look, we're acquiring sort of this shareholding, we're spending money, our shareholders' money, in order to achieve this, and realistically, I think that's not going to happen.
But would you then agree that if you invest, rather than if you have an asset fund and you do investments, basically a portfolio theory says you spread your risks and so on like that, would it then from that perspective not be highly illogical? You have a company, you want to invest some money, and just to get some benefits out there. You have 1,000 other companies to choose from, and then you say, you know what, I'm going to spread my risk, I'm going to invest in my competitor. From that perspective, it just doesn't make sense. So, and therefore I think, there could be something where you just, even if you just have it in your guidelines or something like that, it doesn't have to be a hard law, but basically say, look, if you do this kind of things, really think about it very, 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 very carefully, because from all perspectives, it does make sense. It's completely contradictory to the line that investment is, the general assumption investment is good. Investing in competitors, generally, there's very, very high risk, so be very careful. So that's why I'm saying, like, reversal of move or whatever, and it can be the evidencing that we took all the measures, but even then, it doesn't make sense. Why do you want to take all these measures? Why not just invest in something in a completely different area if that is really your objective? So I think that from a competition law perspective, investing in a competitor, in me, is a red flag. And like I said, you can say the 10%, but then we talk about multi-product companies where the maths are completely different. It can also be minorities in several competitors, etc., etc. It becomes all complicated. I think, therefore, as a general rule, like I said, but it's good to have discussion. But like I said, I think reversal of goods, it should be a red flag. It should be looked at very, very carefully.
I completely agree with you about the red flag. And it's a question you must ask as an outside counsel. This is the first question you ask. Why do you do it? I just think that these sort of automatic changes in incentives aren't the cases that really do come up. There are other cases, and they may be sort of anti-competitive, definitely. Don't get me wrong. This is why you need to ask the question. But it's not the acquisition as such, but everything around it that should get you worried.
I think we probably have to end it there. I think as we, in closing, aside from all of this, I think we've already heard correctly, these are inherent unilateral incentives that we're talking about in many cases, but that's me taking the last word as my moderator right, and I'll say thank you to everyone.
Merger control topics. They've managed to take some of the most technical and tangled scenarios out there and make them not just interesting, maybe a little bit more complicated, and they've also left us with just enough unanswered questions to keep us thinking over coffee. So let's break for coffee, ladies and gentlemen, and we resume at 11. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've all had a refreshing break and one last chance to enjoy the Mauritian coffee fuel for what's coming next. This next session is called Tools and Practices for Effective and Timely Management of Merger Cases. But don't let the practical title fool you. What we're really about to see is the creative side of merger control, the smart solutions, the digital tools, and the process innovations that agencies around the world are developing to keep their merger clocks ticking on time and even ahead of time. And we begin this session with a presentation on the outcomes of the project, led by Mr. Sailesh Ramyad, Head of Investigations at the Competition Commission of Mauritius and Head of the Mergers Department. Sailesh is known for his sharp focus and dedication to keep that merger clock ticking no matter what. And even without a mandatory merger regime, he makes sure time doesn't just fly by, it runs on schedule. We're lucky to have him guide us through the latest developments. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Sailesh Ramyad to present the outcomes of this ICN Merger Working Group project.
Thank you, Noor. Now I understand why you asked me not to blush. So, welcome to this last session of the ICN Merger Workshop 2025, whereby we will be discussing an important topic on tools and practices for effective and timely management of merger cases. Maybe some of you are already aware of this project, which was launched in 2024, and which is being currently led by the Competition Commission of Mauritius. The objective of this project is to compile tools and practices which are used by competition authorities around the world to enhance effectiveness of merger case management. The reason behind is that merger cases are time sensitive, so we cannot delay at our level as competition authorities in terms of times that we take to assess those cases. And for that purposes, we must have effective practices in our institution. And also we must have tools which will enable us firstly to ensure that cases are being managed in a timely manner and also in an effective manner. This project must not be confronted with the ICN project on investigation techniques. They are different. So in this one, our focus is not on investigation techniques, but rather on tools that we use for management of merger cases. We as competition authorities, ourselves, for example, Mauritius, where, as Noor said, we have a voluntary notification regime. We do have notification from time to time, 2-3 per year. But still, we find it quite challenging for us to be able to complete assessment on a timely manner. So we ourselves, we were in the process of trying to find means of how we can enhance our own process. And now when we are working on this project, we do realize that the tools were available already here, being already used by other competition authorities. So, for example, last week, our IT manager was talking to us. She's just entering there, who also happened to be the event manager for this event. She wanted to change our own case management system. And as project lead of this particular project, we are aware which authorities already have similar tools. And I asked her so we can contact those authorities to get an idea on what they are doing, how they are doing, on a bilateral basis, so that we can get inspired by their already existing system and also learn from the challenges that they faced. So we believe this tool would be really helpful for competition authorities. As output of this project, we expect to produce a report whereby we will already list all tools that we have gathered through this project, and whereby competition authorities who are interested can then directly liaise with the relevant competition authorities to, on a bilateral basis, try to see how they can try to get inspired or get any assistance to use those tools. But before I go into further insight on this project, I would like to thank all agencies who have responded to our survey. I would also like to thank the ICN Merger Working Group co-chairs for their support in this project and also in organizing this workshop, namely Competition Bureau of Canada, Autorité de la Concurrence France, the CNMC, and without forgetting previous ICN co-chairs, namely the EU Digicom and Competition Authority of Norway. I also thank my team members for their hard work on this project, in particular Naida, Julie, and Riva. And also, I would like to thank them for their contribution in making this workshop a success. And to that list, I would add, obviously, other team members, Prishni, Karuna, and also Minakshi and Noor, who contributed to make this workshop a real success. And there is no staff of the Competition Commission who has not been directly involved into organization of this workshop. So I would like to thank all staff of the Competition Commission for their support. A special thanks also goes to the Executive Director of the Competition Commission, Mr. Vipin Noga. He is coming in a few minutes, and the Commission for their support and encouragement for both this project and organization of this ICN Merger Workshop. Well, coming back to this project, so as I said, it was started in 2024, and as a first step, we carried a BOS, a breakout session during the ICN annual conference in Brazil, whereby we discussed on a preliminary basis on what can be input to this project, and it also served as a guide. And another session, which was more focused on practitioners' perspective, was conducted during the ICN Merger Workshop in Taiwan. So that enabled us to get some key insight on what tools and practices NGAs and practitioners do believe would be important that can create a better interaction between competition authorities and NGAs. It was quite surprising to see that at times what we competition authorities, we believe are tools that expedite merger investigations may be viewed as an impediment by certain NGAs. I recall one example was pre-merger notification, whereby for us it is a tool here to assist companies in their notification process, and it is a tool to expedite matters. But in one panel, one NGA gave a perspective that this may be an impediment, and in fact it may create additional hurdles for companies by making additional requirement, increasing the length of the process. So I guess it's not only about the tool, but how it is designed and how it is, in fact, put in place, how it is implemented, which are also important. Hopefully, when this project is completed, we'll have more insight on what tools, what practice competition authorities use even for notification to assist them in expediting their merger assessment and notification process. So following these two work sessions, we also then issued, well, we call it a questionnaire. It's not a questionnaire. We sent an email to all ICN Merger Working Group members calling for their contribution to this project in terms of tools and practices that they have implemented in their authorities, and to share these tools with us, together with challenges they face and how these tools have been helpful to them. And the deadline to respond was in January 2025. We received certain responses, following which we analyzed, obviously, those responses. Not all submissions were tools and practices. Some, as I said, some were more investigation techniques, so we tried to work on that. And at this current stage, we have already produced a first draft, and we have sent competition authorities who gave us submission their extract of their part in that report for verification. So once we receive response and confirmation of those competition authorities, we'll proceed with the next step to produce a first draft that will be circulated to ICN members for their views. this is quite important process for us because we do understand that certain tools may be confidential or authorities may wish to keep it confidential. So we must have their views prior to, for us to produce a report that we can circulate for consultation. We are targeting to finalize this project, so to issue the final report of this project before the next ICN annual conference. So hopefully early 2026. And obviously, if the possibility will be there, so we can include a session on that in the next ICN annual conference. So as I said, in terms of process, we requested input. Obviously, we had to analyze what we received in terms of inputs. There were quite some interesting submissions. Some were quite lengthy, so we tried to analyze it. Now we're in the process of validation, so we have tried to filter out those tools and practices which qualify for the project, and we have sent them to competition authorities for their consent for us to include that in the report. And then next step would be publication. So as I said, we tried to carry sort of a survey, so 41 competition authorities responded to us by giving us submission on tools and practices, which I would say is for us quite a very good result for this kind of survey. And it happens that the number of respondents, 41, is equal to the number of jurisdictions which is represented here. It's a mere coincidence. And only 16 of the 41 who responded are here. So they are not the same crowd. And in the 41 submission, there were 129 tools or practices which were submitted. So we went through all of them, and we tried to categorize them into these 6 categories. So merger notification, which would relate to pre-notification and notification processes and tools. Merger assessment, which would be more about substantive assessment tools for market definition, for SLC, for UPP, etc. Tools and practices which are used to craft merger remedies, and case management system tools, which are for mergers, or some authorities have tools which are used for mergers and also for other enforcement areas. We got quite a lot of submission on quality management and standard operating procedures which are used as tools. So we put them as a special category. And then we have other tools and practices which, well, we have a lot of variety of tools, so we have put all of them into other practices. So in terms of the responses, you would see this reflect a bit the discussions that we were having previously with, during the 2 breakout sessions that we mentioned earlier in Brazil and in Taiwan. So even the practitioners mentioned that what important tools for expediting merger would be the notification process. So in our submission, 49% of the respondents did submit certain tools which would fall in the category of merger notification, followed by other practices. So, well, obviously, we have all type of tools in that. And then we have case management systems. Interestingly, we also have tools for merger assessment. So obviously, there have been submissions, for example, HHI is a tool, which for us, the tool is not really HHI. HHI is more investigation techniques. But we have also got tools on how they really, for example, use HHI, for example, by having a particular program or software. These would be more for us the tools that would qualify. We have received quite some submissions that competition authorities do use quality management system and standard operating procedures to assist them in ensuring that merger assessment are being conducted on a timely manner, and also that there is quality right first time. And we have received few submissions on remedies, tools used for remedies, for example, models that they have designed, etc. We will not go into details of each of those tools. We keep the suspense for the final report, obviously. whereby you will have the opportunity to get details on all those tools. And also we'll mention in that report which competition authority has made submission for that tool. So basically there will be a table categorized in this manner, whereby we'll detail the tools that the competition authority has submitted, and also the name of the competition authority and a contact person in that competition authority. So anyone who is then interested in a particular tool can simply contact the person in that competition authority to get more insight or to get more information on that particular tool. Then, as we said, obviously, we cannot present all the tools, 129 tools here today. But what we have tried to do, we have tried to identify 5 tools which appeared to be relevant for this session of today. We have tried to identify one in each of those categories, except for other practices. And today, we are pleased here to announce that according to us, obviously, we are not here to really rate which of these tools and practices is the best. It would obviously depend on the context of each competition authority and economy. But based on the categorization, we have tried to look for one tool per category, which we believe would be appropriate for today's presentation. And in fact, obviously, in our selection, we have taken into account to what extent the tools are innovative, to what extent we believe they will bring value to the process, and the extent to which they can be copied or inspired by other competition authorities. So we have a case management system and ERFI by the EU DigiCom, which will be presented today by Mr. Dominic. We have also found Geospatial Analysis Project and Eagle Eye Project of the Competition Bureau of Canada, which will be presented by Mr. Ryan. We have identified ISO certification and a mobile app which has been implemented by the Competition Authority of Kenya, which will be presented by Ms. Tecla. We have the e-Notifica of CADE, Brazil, which will be presented by Mr. Alessandro Barreto. We also identified pre-notification and corrective measures submission system from Korea, which pertain to pre-notification and remedies. Unfortunately, we have not secured a presentation from them, but we'll ensure that you have more information on these tools in our report. So without any further delay, I will invite our panelists to present their respective project. So starting with EU DigiCom, Mr. Dominic, the floor is yours.
Better? Yeah. Okay, good morning again. So I'm presenting our case management system used for the merger instrument in DigiComp. It's called CMS. It is used to create cases and store the metadata, including the case team composition and case calendars, market information, and adopted decisions. The case calendar shows legal deadlines and indicative work deadlines for the case teams, so that's very useful. The integrated document management tool is ETMA. It is used to register all incoming and outgoing correspondence and to feed the e-discovery full text search tool. Case teams can see their case files in CMS and also prepare their files for access to file to merging parties. CMS provides data and documents for publication on our website. Each merger case also has a case library and collaborative space that can be accessed through links from CMS. Our merger statistics are drawn from data stored in the CMS, and CMS is therefore at the heart of merger case management in DigiComp. Now, very soon, this case management system will be replaced by a new system, which is already used by other instruments, and that so basically these other instruments, which have maybe less pressing deadlines, have been used to stress test the new system. And so we will transfer to this new system called Case ATC,
which has some additional functionalities, including being able to communicate within the European competition network with other competition authorities in the EU. And then the next tool I'm presenting is related to requests for information. So as in most authorities, I believe requests of information are at the heart of our merger work. And there is an electronic tool to support us in this work called eRFI. This eRFI tool has been developed to support the entire life cycle of RFIs from their preparation to submission. The eRFI application enhances the efficiency and security of the RFI process, allowing the Commission to collect timely, accurate, and comprehensive responses, which are crucial for meeting investigative deadlines. The eRFI application can be used collaboratively by the case teams to design and review the questionnaires, and then can also be used to securely distribute questionnaires to market participants and respondents ranging from large corporations to smaller entities have access to a secure web-based interface to co-draft and submit their responses, including the option to claim confidentiality. And I think this co-drafting functionality is very important because otherwise the respondents might download the RFI and then submit it in another form. Additional features of the eRFI application include a catalog of question types, reporting tools for analyzing responses, and integration with the Commission's corporate translation service to support multilingual questionnaires and submissions. The application also links with the European Commission document management system, so this is this new case system, KZTC I already mentioned, to ensure proper registration of all documents, and it includes a secure large file transfer feature. Case teams and respondents benefit from an automatic notification system that provides alerts on deadlines, requests for clarification, and other key actions. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you, Dominic. We have a case management system. I'm not criticizing it, but we were quite impressed by the systems that you have in terms of its comprehensiveness, also in terms of the extent to which it is integrated with other systems. Thank you very much. So I invite the next presentation, so on Geospatial Analysis Project and Eagle Eye of the Competition Bureau of Canada. So Mr. Ryan.
Thank you. So thanks for the invitation. So I'll describe our geospatial analysis project and maybe use the branding Eagle Eye. So the problem here that we're working on is that obviously the Bureau, like most agencies, I'm sure, reviews many transactions every year that involve assessment of a very large number of local markets. So our case handlers have historically dedicated significant time and resources to collecting the geospatial data, collating, cleaning, geocoding the data that comes from various different sources, and then conducting, for example, initial analyses of market structure across locations to try to identify areas of higher concentration. So that might involve, for example, in the past, sometimes mapping and manually validating the data in GIS software, doing various market share calculations. So I guess under our statutory timelines, dedicating a lot of resources to that work can impact the time that we're able to devote to in-depth analysis of concentrated markets. And that has implications potentially for our ability to narrow the number of markets that were included in, for example, a supplementary information request, our equivalent to the second request, or overall reaching timely conclusions and being able to focus in more depth on the areas of concern. So since 2024, the Data and Analytics Unit and the Mergers Directorate at the Bureau have been developing what's called Eagle Eye. So it's an in-house geospatial analysis tool. So again, aimed at reducing the time and resources spent on additionally identifying concentration and assessing the structure of those markets once they're identified. So essentially it allows the case handler to rapidly analyze and visualize structural changes in each local market. So it essentially includes 3 phases, I guess. The first is a geocoding engine that automates all the data cleaning, standardization, and validation process, combines data from multiple sources if needed, and then so revenue, location, and other relevant data, whatever it might be, can be uploaded in sort of CSV format, and then a custom-built geocoding module uses multiple geocoding APIs to compare and validate the results and make sure that address information is accurately geocoded. In the past, inaccurate coordinates, for example, have been an obstacle for some local market analyses. So that's a benefit of the tool. And then after geocoding, it can automates aspects of a standard structural analysis. So for example, it'll calculate market share, for merging party locations based on things like straight line distance or drive times or isochrones. And then it'll generate sort of market share evolution charts so that the team can visually analyze those. And it can produce a variety of automated reports that might range from rankings of markets based on maximum concentration to, as I said, charts that allow the officer to visualize market shares depending on different geographic or product market scenarios. And then the third phase is a web tool named Eagle Eye. So that's hosted internally and includes a set of dashboards with interactive maps and dynamic market share tables. So that can replace some aspects of that separate sort of labor-intensive GIS mapping exercise that might otherwise be necessary. And it also dynamically performs share analyses. So the tool can be used to identify local markets where shares might be high. And then there's a map and dashboard that can be used to conduct further assessments and visualize the markets. So the user can use filters, on-demand radii or isochrones, to look at different scenarios or custom draw geographic areas in the map. And then they dynamically get updated share analysis or other indicators for their analysis for the market. And then obviously further data, so if ever there's updated revenues or new information to take into account, can be added to the tool and the tool will clean and validate again and update the analysis. So that's really the phases. I think the hope is that the Eagle Eye tool will offer efficiency gains and sort of other benefits for local market analyses, as I said. It can let us conduct preliminary market share analysis more quickly. And as I said, allows for the consideration of shares quickly under various scenarios on a market-by-market basis. And it can also be, for example, used by multiple team members in parallel when reviewing a case. And allows us to advance our reviews more quickly and focus earlier on concentrated markets that have been identified.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Thank you very much for sharing those insights on this very interesting tool. For sure, we'll be in contact with you to see to what extent we can try to get inspired from that tool. We also understand that the Competition Authority of Kenya has implemented quality management system and they are ISO certified, well, ISO or ISO. In Mauritius, we use French and English, so we say ISO here. So it is ISO certified. So now I invite Ms. Tekla to share an insight on the ISO certification and also on the mobile app that they have developed.
Hello. Thank you for this opportunity. I'll present about ISO certification. Most of you know about ISO. ISO stands for International Organization Standard. It's a form of a certification. There are different standards within it, 3 of them. But today I'm going to focus more on the quality management system, which is part of the standard under ISO. So the quality management system at the authority is quite has taken at all really for a good amount of time, and it's really embedded in our systems. And so this mainly focuses on quality, and for us, quality and mergers and acquisitions is timelines. And so what we've done is we've integrated a quality management system even in our case management system. And for that I mean that we've indicated the timelines which are supposed for any case handler. All the timelines for a certain process are well ingraded into the case management system in such a way that, for example, parties request for confidentiality. The system automatically calculates the due date for the timelines in which the case handler is supposed to grant that confidentiality to the parties. So that is an example. We also have procedures that outline all the mini processes in our merger assessment. And all these procedures are also part of the case management system with regards to timelines. And even we also have the e-filing portal. E-filing portal, we've also integrated the timelines which are under our quality management system into the portal in such a way that if parties file a notification, automatically the notification is acknowledged to their email once it is submitted. And also, we also have a service charter, which is also part of the quality management system tool. And this service charter outlines all the timelines that we take in our processes, be it granting confidentiality, be it review of our merger notifications. All these are found in our service charter, which is on our website. So this quality management system, the way the authority has managed to keep it integrated into our system, or rather the authority team appreciating the quality management system, is that the management has full support on this system in such a way that there's capacity buildings for the standard. So what happens is for every department, there's a champion. We call them champion. There's a departmental champion who's in charge, who's the lead for quality management system. So that champion is trained and is trained about the implementation of the system and also auditing the system, the quality management system standard. And they're in charge of every quarter. We do sensitization in the departments, and then every year we do internal audits. So these champions are also trained auditors in such a way that every year we do audits in different departments to make sure that departments are adhering to the standard. Okay. And then also the quality management system, some aspects are also integrated in the contracts with the service providers. Service providers, these are the external service providers which we need in our operations. And I think apart from the quality management system, we've also introduced the business continuity management system and the information security management system. So these ones, they have different objectives. Business continuity management system was introduced due to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2019, so in 2020, so we saw the need of having that standard in place. And also the ISMS, which is the information security management system. Of course, we are dealing with a lot of information assets every day. All our processes are digitized, so we deal with a lot of with a lot of information access. That's why we also introduced the information security management system to ensure that these information assets are preserved. So under these 3 systems, we do conduct risk assessment for each system, under each, of course, led by each champion, departmental champion. The different objectives which are clearly updated every financial year. We update. Even the risk assessment we do every year. And we also have management review meetings after the audit. I think that's all for the ISO. And then for the mobile app, it's currently under development. We had a little bit of issues with the developer, but what was in this mobile app, it allowed parties to calculate thresholds. So parties can easily download the app using the Android or Apple, and they can even calculate the turnover, the thresholds, and the amount of filing fees they're supposed to pay. The app also contains forms and guidelines. Just at a click of a button, you can just access all the guidelines under the specific department that you wish. And the app also had previous determinations that were made by the authority. So it's still under development, and we hope to have it operationalized very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the submission, we have received several tools that are used by competition authorities for notification system, including filing and e-notifications. But the one being used by Brazil, we found it very interesting and really comprehensive. It was quite different from the others, so we thought it might be very interesting for us to better understand that particular tool. So I invite Mr. Alexandre Barreto to give us an insight on that tool.
Thank you, thank you. Can you give me the control to the slides? I have a few more slides to present you the system. But first of all, I'd like to congratulate the Merger Working Group for this project, for this initiative. It's the very essence of ICN, this exchange of information, and permit us to learn from each other how to do our job better. And thanks for the opportunity to present our new system. But before presenting the system, let me tell you a very short story. The current Brazilian antitrust law was approved in 2011. During the discussions in the Congress about the new law, one of the main concerns of the market was the time of analysis by CADE, by the Brazilian authority, in merger cases. Before the new law, we had an ex-ante regime, and after the law, the approval of CADE is mandatory for closing the cases. And in the first year of the law, in 2013, we analyzed like 300 cases in an average time of 90 days. And we are continuously working to improve the efficiency of the process. Last year, in 2024, we analyzed 712 cases in the average time of 21 days. So we are increasingly working to make the analysis more efficient. And why I'm telling you this story? The e-Notifica system was created in this context, in the context of do our job better. And what is the e-Notifica? It's a real digital platform to permit to the petitioners to notify mergers to CADE, both summary and ordinary mergers. The difference is summary are the fast-track cases and the ordinary cases are the common cases. And the objective of the project is to digitize the notification process. And in the second step, to permit us to automate the review itself. And how is the process, the notification process now? Since 2015, we have an information electronic system for all the federal bodies, all the federal agencies. So we don't use paper anymore. All the projects are digitalized. So the petitioners now must complete the form and present to CADI as a file, a PDF file. So in a sense, we read the file. It's not in paper, it's in the computer, but we're just reading the form and to make the analysis. The idea of the e-Notifica is to make it completely digital, 100% digital. I'll show you in the next slides the face of the system itself. And we have many facilities in the system and many advantages in the system. The fact of being 100% digital can permit that we have the interoperability with other federal systems, checking, for instance, data about revenue, shareholding, and other kind of information. The system also permits the sharing of the form among different petitioners. If you have more than one law firm, for instance, they can exchange the versions of the form before present to the authority. After the notification, the system permits the automatic export of the information in the system to our system of electronic information. Another functionality is the payment of the fee that has to be automatic. In the system, the petitioner can pay for the fee using credit card, using transfer invoice, or even use the new automatic system for payments in Brazil, the PIX, very popular in Brazil. Another functionality, very interesting, is the validation of the form before the notification is submitted to the authority. So the system checks the information and shows to the petitioner if something's wrong or something's missing. It's very useful for us. And import the drafted form into a digital version. Let me show you the system itself. This is our web page in the internet. As you see below, a link, it's in yellow, distilled in yellow, is the link that permits the petitioners assess the process in CADI, but all the process on the electronic system. After that, they will be moved to this page where the petitioners can check all the process submitted to CADI in case there is more than one process, of course. In this page, they can save the draft for notifications. They start the filling. They can save the drafts, and after finish the notification, they send to the authority. In this page, they can also monitor the notified mergers, and they can sign the documents electronically. This is one part of the form. As you can see, we have a lot of parts. This is the third part. It's the form completion. Here we have information like it's very small to read, but like the case is summary or ordinary, in which kind of merger it's being submitted, and all the information. You also have spaces to attach documents. Some part of the form can be filled just clicking the buttons, and of course you have open spaces to petitioners give more information, detailed information. This is the last part of the process, the form validation. as you can see, are like 7 steps, 9 steps actually. In this case, it's just an example. 2 of the steps are wrong. The 5th is the theory of harm involved in the case. It was not completed. And the last one, the payment of the fee. So in this case, the petitioner will not be able to submit the notification to CAD because 2 parts are wrong, are missing. Well, we started this project in December 23. Since then, we have very good results. The first case was notified in the system in April 2024. Up to now, we had 62 cases submitted by the e-Notifica platform. The time limit is significantly lower in the e-Notifica. In this case, we're talking just about summary cases, important to note. Now, only the summary cases are being submitted in the e-Notifica. In the future, we'll open to ordinary cases too. So I told you that our average time of analysis is 21 days, sorry, considering all the notifications. When we consider only the summary cases, our average time of analysis is 14 days, but the ones that are submitted inside the e-Notifica are analyzed in just 9 days. So we can affirm that the e-Notifica is 43% faster than the traditional method. Next steps for the project. I would say more important than this is to consolidate the platform, consolidate the project. It's not obligatory, it's not mandatory now to the market to submit in the e-Notifica. They can do it in the new system or in the old system. And as in all new initiatives, we can feel a kind of doubt about the system itself now, and we are working to make the system more friendly to the users and ensuring the confidentiality of the system and the security of the system. And the idea is in the future to make it mandatory. The idea in the future, it's open the e-Notifica also for ordinary cases. And one step, a more ambitious step, is to automate the analysis itself, especially for very simple cases that are cases that can be done by AI. But there is a functionality that we are discussing a lot in Brazil. There are many implications about this idea. But I'm pretty sure that in the future we'll do this, first for fast-track cases, and maybe, at least in parts, for the ordinary cases. So, in a very short resume, this is our system. Thank you for the opportunity to present it to you.
Thank you very much for presenting us this very interesting tool with concrete evidence of its results in terms of improvement in process and time saved by this project. So we can see these tools and practices are not only for academic purpose, they are real tools which can be used and implemented to bring concrete results in our merger processes. So now I invite Mr. Vipin Noga, our Executive Director, to give a small token of appreciation to our presenters for the excellent submissions that they have given to this project, and also the excellent presentations that has been made today. So, to start with for EU Digicom, so Mr. Dominic. Next, the CBC for Geospatial Analysis Project through Eagle Eye, Mr. Ryan. Ms. Tekla from Competition Authority of Kenya. Mr. Alessandro Barreto for Inotifica. I will also invite our colleagues from Korea for their interesting submission, unfortunately, which we were not able to present, but will be in our report. Thank you very much for your attention and for the panelists for the excellent presentation on this. We close this last session of the ICN Merger Workshop, and I invite Noor for.
To suspend the merger clock for a while because there's going to be a post-merger market restructuring of this podium. So thank you to all our presenters and congratulations once again to the winners of these well-deserved awards, but to all of our merger enforcers who are improving the merger control regime in one way or another. It's your innovative work that truly sets the standards for merger control excellence. And now, before we officially close the curtains on this amazing 3-day ICN Merger Conference, there's this one final speaker that we absolutely need to hear from. In fact, in one of our internal pre-merger organizing team workshop meetings, that speaker gave us a very, very crisp but very, very clear mission. And I quote, "Make this a conference that people will remember for the good of it, for the hospitality that reaches the hearts of our delegates, and for any single measure or step that makes a difference to the lives of our merger enforcers and their communities." No pressure, right? But the bar was set high because that speaker still remembers his first ICN conference. And let's just say, our team was determined not to be outdone by that ICN conference. Some healthy competition there. Confidentiality claimed, I cannot disclose which one for fear of criminal prosecution under my competition law. But thanks to that speaker's leadership and faith in his team and possibly a few sleepless nights from that beautiful crowd of backbencher enforcers come event management team there, we've made it to finish line, hopefully in style. So to close us out, it is indeed my pleasure to welcome that final speaker, the silent but driving force behind it all, our Executive Director, Mr. Noga. Over to you.
Thank you, Noor. Noor always has good words for me that I can't live up to. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, speakers, and guests, as we bring this insightful and collaborative to serve as a backdrop of this important global gathering, and I hope that our island has offered not only a warm welcome, but also a conducive environment for meaningful dialogue and exchange. This workshop has brought to light core challenges and emerging trends and modern merger control, the interplay between merger control and investment. We examine the relationship between merger control and investment dynamics whilst exploring how mergers can impact incentive and ability to invest and the implications on remedies. The challenges in digital markets. We explored digital markets, evolving landscape, and challenges for competition authorities, focusing on new theory of harm, focusing adapted competition frameworks and network effects. Also analyzed the scope of analysis for competitive parameters in merger assessment. We discussed the growing relevance of non-traditional parameters such as employment, innovation, data security, product functionality, and overall consumer experience in assessing mergers. These discussions are not just academic, they are the foundational to how we protect competition and consumer welfare in a rapidly changing world. As a competition authority, we have gained invaluable insights from these workshops. Insights that will shape and strengthen our work ahead. Let us all live here, not only with new knowledge, but with renewed sense of purpose. However, our journey does not end here. We will continue to connect through social events and future ICN workshops. Indeed, this workshop has shown us that what is possible when we come together with our open minds and steady hearts. The road ahead may bring challenges, but with the unity and resilience we have seen during these past 3 days, I am confident that we will navigate it with grace and strength. Together, we have laid the groundwork for the future built on trust, strength, and collective purpose. Once again, let me express heartfelt thanks to our co-chairs, the competition authorities of Canada, France, Spain, and also Mauritius as well, who is a co-chair. Your leadership and dedication have helped to shape the agenda with clarity and purpose, ensuring a productive and engaging experience for all. To our distinguished speakers and panelists, we thank you for your time and your insights. Your discussions on emerging challenges have sparked meaningful conversation and inspired fresh thinking. To our diverse group of participants, thank you for your willingness to engage. This has truly enriched our discussions, making this workshop not only informative, but truly collaborative. A special thanks also goes to the COMESA Competition Commission for its support. And last but not least, to the organizers and the facilitators of this event. the Competition Commission of Mauritius. Particularly, I would like to name some people: Sailesh, Meenakshi, Prishni. I would like you guys to come on the stage. So, Sailesh, Meenakshi, Prishni, Karuna, Naida, Julie, and in fact, my whole team. So those at the back there, please join us, the whole Competition Commission of Mauritius team.
Leveraging on the efforts of Merger Workshop.
So I might be the one standing here and taking all the credit, but they are the ones who have been toiling in the background to make things happen. I am because they are. So thank you very much to my team. A round of applause to them. So thank you for your tireless efforts for making everything run smoothly. I was not really here yesterday, but I was safe in the knowledge that everything is being taken care of. So well done on this. So with these few words, I close this ICN Merger Workshop 2025 and invite you for lunch, followed by a well-deserved tour of the Pamplemousses Botanical Garden and a sunset cruise to, soak in the island vibes. I told them yesterday for the dinner, the day before, to dress up, and today we can dress down, and, enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Really be my final appearance. As we wrap up the final moments of this year's ICN Merger Workshop 2025, allow me definitely to echo our director's words and thank you all for the insights, the open dialogue, the genuine spirit of collaboration that you've brought to every panel, every presentation, and every coffee break over the past 3 years. And as a director rightly pointed out, Mauritius has one last gift for us. Because here in Mauritius, we don't just believe in murder remedies, we believe in wellness remedies package too. So yes, we'll be taking a gentle walk through the lush SSR Botanical Gardens, an oasis of calm, color, and conservation. And just when you thought that the schedule would be fully cleared, we're definitely throwing in one final activity that needs no pre-merger notification, comes with automatic approval, Sunset Catamaran Cruise. Expect ocean air, golden skies, and the best company, right? And to make sure that we have all of our participants with us during this incredible social event moments, we would kindly request all our participants after lunch break to meet us downstairs at the reception area by 1:45 sharp, because our staff members will be there waiting for you to guide you onto your relevant buses. The buses depart at 2 p.m. on the dot, really on the dot, and we'll be expecting to return after the Sunset Catamaran Cruise by around 8 p.m. at night, and participants who have been staying at the hotels which have been recommended by the workshop organizing committee, you will be dropped off directly at your respective hotels. So get ready to trade lanyards for a pair of sunglasses. This closing is officially cleared without condition. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly check for your personal belongings before leaving. Until we meet next, lunch is served. Bon appétit, ladies and gentlemen.